Welcome. Uh, Somebody requested um, to go over useRef, or they didn't really request it. They just mentioned that they're confused about this concept of useRef. So I figured, let me create a video trying to explain useRef in the simplest way I can think of. Okay, so I'll be going over what it is, its usage, how it's different from state, and I'm going to give you guys another example. All right, let's get into it. So what is it? So don't worry if this definition here on the screen does not make sense to you, but I'll just highlight the most important part. So useRef, you can see right there, useRef initial value is a hook or a function that accepts one argument, which is a default value. It has a special property that is called current. So it's sort of like an object with the key current. So if you do that reference, whatever you called it, whatever constant use, variable use, let's say in this case it's reference, then if you do reference that current, it will access that value. Well, obviously initially it will be set to that initial value. If you want to update it, it's pretty simple. You just do, the reference to this object, which like I said, we used reference here in this case, reference.current equals new value. And that will update the value. It's pretty simple, actually. I do agree with this. And by the way, this is based on a short tutorial that I will share. I will share the link in the description of this video. Definitely check it out. Okay, so there's two important rules to remember about references. The value of the reference is persistent, so it does not change every time there's a re-render. That's sort of important. And then updating a reference doesn't trigger a component re-rendering. Okay, that is also incredibly important, and you'll see why here in a bit. Okay, so, but I'm gonna make it even simpler. All it is, useRef, is just a state. Like, it's a state. And I'll explain what the difference is between a state and this type of state. Okay, so you guys are all familiar at this point what a React state is, right? So I think that's the next part, actually. No, let's go over an example. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys an example right here. Again, I got this example from that tutorial, which I thought was the best tutorial on this topic, hands down. So I'm going to share it. But I also wanted to go over it to sort of provide another set of instructions. Okay, don't forget to import useRef. Easy to forget. Okay, here it is. You have a constant called countRef. Remember, we called it reference in the text that I just showed you. In this case, we call it countRef. And you just call on useRef, the function, and provide it the value 0. Then down here, all we're doing is rendering a button. You can see the button right here. It says click me. When you click it, it will run handle. What does handle do? You can see that it updates the current value. This is sort of the same as count ref.current equals +1, in case you're confused. Okay, we're just updating the value. So this is also another way to put it. Here you put the updated value. Okay, which you saw in the text that I shared right before this. And then we're just console logging how many times we've clicked on this button, or the value of countRef.current. All right. And then here we have another console log that just says I rendered. So every time this component renders, like this button gets rendered, this will be outputted. Okay. So if I open up the console, and actually, I don't know why the console didn't clear out. Oh, there it is. Okay, there we go. you can see in the console, we only see one message, I rendered, because the component just rendered once. That's it. So far, nothing else has happened. We don't see any of the clicked messages yet because those only happen when we click on handle. So if I do click on handle, you can see the clicked 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, but you don't see the I rendered message. Okay? So I hope this makes sense to you. So again, we're not re-rendering every time we update the value. That's really the main lesson here. All right, let's go back to our little notes. Put this away. That was an example. Okay, now let's talk about the difference between state and useRef. Updating, again, I just mentioned this already 2-3 times, but updating a reference does not trigger re-rendering, while updating the state makes the component re-render. Okay, that's sort of important. The reference update is synchronous. Okay, so I don't want you to get confused with the synchronous asynchronous part, because I can totally see how that could confuse somebody. So focus more on this bolded part right here. The updated reference value is available right away. Okay, the state variable is updated after re-rendering. So that's also sort of important. Maybe not right now initially when you first start doing React, but eventually this will sort of be more important, because you'll run into problems and not knowing what's going on potentially. So just know that when you use useRef and you update the value, it's right there. Okay, it's available right away. You don't have to wait till it's re-rendered. I like this part right here, this description right here, just because this helped me understand it a lot better. Because I was wondering, like, why not use state? Because as I was learning about useRef, I'm like, oh, that sounds a lot like state. But it's about what information you're trying to handle. If you handle, they called it here, infrastructure data of side effects. Pretty fancy. But really, anything that's not being shown on the page, that's not part of the render, the render part. Like if you are rendering something that depends on the state, use state, obviously. But if there's something that just needs to be handled programmatically, that just needs to, it's metadata, it's not the stuff that gets rendered, then you could use useRef. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, let's you know what? Let's go over another example. Okay, another usage case. So let's say you have a component, and actually, you know what? Before I go into that, let me demonstrate the difference between the state and the useRef. Let me see, is this the right example? Okay, so this uses state, okay? It does not use useRef. You saw the useRef example, right? Maybe I can put them next to each other. So this is the state example. This is the useRef example, okay? So I'm going to show you the state example. You can see we defined state right here. In the actually, you know what I can do? I can do something else. In the useRef example, oops, didn't mean to delete the other line. We have okay, there we go. This is the useRef example, and this is the state example. State useRef. Okay, so then this part doesn't change. The button is still the button. It still calls on handle. Nothing changes. This part doesn't change. I rendered part doesn't change. And I'm going to refresh the page. I don't know if I'm going to lose this. That will not be saved. So I'm not gonna, I just wanted to clear the console right here. Okay, just know that the only thing that you should be seeing when you first load this is iRendered. And then in handle, we update count. So this is the state way, right? State. And this part stays the same, but instead of calling the reference, we call them the state name. And then here we update the state. Okay, so this is the state way of doing it. So how did we do it with the useRef? Do you guys remember? With the useRef, we did it like so. Okay? So that's how we updated it. And we didn't have to do a second, we didn't have to have that second line that we have with state, which is set count. All right, so I hope this sort of shows the difference. And then, so okay, here's obviously the most important part. When I click it, okay, look what happens. It says clicked 1 time and I rendered. Click 2 times and I rendered. And you get the point, right? So it forces the read render. Okay, I think that should be good enough for that. So let's go back to focusing, and you'll see a lot of useRef, I've noticed, or a lot of the examples that I've seen, a lot of tutorials I've seen, they use it on an element, an HTML element in the DOM. So let's look at that example. Okay, so here is an example where we well, let's start right here. You can see that the name of this particular reference is input ref. It sort of gives away what we're going to use it for. And you can also notice there's no default value. Okay, so default value is not required, in other words. And then this part is important. When you want to use it on an element, there's a second part to it. You specify, obviously, like if you just have this, how would you know what element this is referring to, right? So we're not using it for like a number. We're not using it for a string, Is it frozen? No. We're not using it for a string. We're not using it for a array. Funny thing, have you noticed how it keeps jumping from here to here? Because that's the whole example. The whole point of the example is to focus on this. Okay, so we're not using any of this. We're using an empty, value here, and then we do this to tell it that it refers to this particular element input. Okay, simple enough. Then in the useEffect hook, you can see whenever this gets called in the lifecycle, I think it's after everything is mounted, we tell it, hey, you have to call the dot current. I think a lot of people will just try to do input ref dot something, but you have to do dot current. Very important, obviously. That will get the actual value, whatever that value is, which is going to be the input element. We're saying call dot focus on it. And I'm sure there's a way you can look up, obviously you can Google what options are available to you in terms of elements. So focus is just one option, calling on the focus function, which will focus on this element, right? So if we had, let's say, 2 elements, right? Oops, it keeps focusing on the input field, which is what it's supposed to do. That's the whole point of this example, but it can also be very annoying. Okay, so if we have 2 and we get rid of this part, right? Okay, or even 3, whatever, 4. Oops, forgot type. Okay, cool. So let's say I wanted to just focus on the 3rd one, right? For some strange reason, that's the one we want to focus on. So now look, if I make it, like, look where it goes. So it goes right here to the third one. All right, cool. I think I covered the most important aspect of this topic. The tutorial that I'm going to share with you has a few more things listed, or talks about a few more things. So go ahead and check it out. It's actually, you know what, let me pull it up. So if you need more info, just check out this tutorial. I will share the link in the description of this video. Other than that, I guess it's standard to ask whoever watched this to subscribe. I'm not obsessed over it, but if you want to subscribe, great. Yeah, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.